When my brother was really little, he was spurred by a large Dominica rooster. Now, Dominica roosters are those giant roosters that are famous for killing other chickens. Well, in the process, my dad found out that this rooster had spurred my brother. He grabs the rooster by the neck and proceeds to swing it around to kill it. Well, in the process of wringing this rooster's neck, the bird craps all over his head. And to make matters even worse, we were on well water, and since our power had been out, he could not watch the bird crap off of his head.
If you wanted something scary,
after about an hour of ringing and ringing and ringing,
one year for Halloween, Ben told our whole art class about the haunted ghost
road. He tosses it behind the chicken coop and goes about his business.
Ben borrowed his mom's beat-up minivan. 7 of us piled in, and off we went. We drove forever. Ended up in the middle of nowhere, fields on both sides. And he parked in between these two massive, gnarly trees.
He most definitely
story has it, 2 slaves were wrongfully hung on those trees, and their ghosts haunt that road to this day. Well, he turned the van off.
When I lived in New York, upstate New York, not New York City, some kids I used to hang out with told me the story of why there was this memorial near the side of the road. Well, they said what had happened was a man being in the military and all was sent overseas. And when he came home, he found that his wife was with another man. He snapped and put a knife on her and started stabbing.
I got a story for you. I ran in the house and about 5 or 6 houses. So nothing spooky ever happened there. But I do recall this one house that sat on top of the hill. This guy just went crazy and killed his wife and kids.
Well,
eventually
she got there, she died. I always thought that maybe the memorial was for a car or something, but that story did kind of put a little twist on it.
Eventually his aunt ended up buying the house, and she lives there today. But I wonder if the house is really haunted.
But what really haunts me?
When I was about 7 or 8 years old, my dad, my Uncle David, and my cousin Craig all decided to go shoot bows and arrows. Obviously, they had been drinking. My house was right here. My inflatable swimming pool, which they had already deflated with their drunken arrows, was right here. And my grandmother's driveway was all the way down there where they were shooting from. They told us that if we were going to come outside to yell really loudly so none of them would shoot any of us. It's been about 3 hours. I'm 7 years old. I am dying to go outside and play. I slowly open the door. I creep down the side of the house, and then when I get to the end of the house, whoosh! An arrow goes right by my head. And what haunts me to this day is what if?
You know those nights when you're just moseying around your room and you stumble across that box full of things you just can't get rid of. Love letters, diary entries, mementos. This stack of pictures is in my box. They're of my car wreck. It was a very serious car wreck. I'll spare you the details. Basically, I hit 2 18-wheelers head-on the interstate, exploded, jaws of life, ambulances, shut down the interstate. Long story. And though the memories of that car wreck are with me every day, one specific detail will always haunt me. It's how my mom found out. You see, I was alert through the whole thing. I remember the crash. I remember the hordes of people coming to check on me to see if I was okay. I remember them trying to save me. I remember everything. Or so I thought. A few days later, when leaving the hospital, my mom says to me, she says, "Baby, you have a guardian angel." Now this was significant considering I wasn't particularly religious at the time. And she said, when I got in my car wreck, her cell phone rang. It's an unknown number. Hello? Miss Rowan, my name is Antoine. And your daughter Brittany has been in a very serious car wreck. Who is this? How am I supposed to... What? Who is this? Where are you? Miss Rowan. She's okay. No one is here with her but me, but trust me, she is in good hands. Where are you? How can I get there? What's going on? He proceeded to tell her the exact address in the name of the hospital I was at. Well, stay there with her. I'm on my way. I'm coming. Please stay there. Miss Rowan, I'm a truck driver, and I have a deadline to make. I've got to go. And he hung up. Immediately, she hit redial, and the phone just rang and rang and rang. No answering machine, no busy signal, nothing. By the time she finished the story, we had reached the impound where the remains of my two-door Honda Civic were crushed. And there, under the passenger seat, cracked and crumbled and crushed, was my cell phone. Antoine couldn't have used my cell phone to get my mother's phone number. And what did he mean I was alone but in good hands? What about all the people I remember being there? And, you know, I don't know, who is Antoine? Why am I here? What haunts me is not in these pictures.
I believe I'm haunted by something that most people don't normally worry or think about. I guess we can say I'm haunted by a particular number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. As you can tell, the number 7. Now, this number has had some control over my life for the past 2 years or so. And I know this is a hard concept to understand, so let's say that I'm brushing my teeth. I have to brush each side of my mouth 7 times. 7, 7, 7. Okay? Or let's say I'm watching TV. I have to flip to every 7th channel before I can choose something to watch. 7, 7, 7. Now I know it doesn't make any sense at all, but I find a way to justify my obsession in each of my actions. And I tell myself, if I don't fit this number into my daily routine, something terrible is going to happen, like my guitar string's going to pop, or my hamster's going to overeat himself to death. It doesn't make any sense at all, but it does bring this kind of calm over me. So I guess what truly haunts me is if my obsession fails and something really does happen. But what's with this deadly number 7?
What haunts me is a leg. Why a leg? Let me tell you. 2 o'clock in the morning, summer night, can't sleep. Where do you go in Statesboro at 2 o'clock in the morning? Walmart. But not just any Walmart, Savannah. So we're going down Interstate 16, window rolled down, wind blowing in the hair, music up real loud, only car on the road, or at least we thought. Out of nowhere, a white Ford Explorer passes us, and it starts rolling and rolling and rolling till it ends up here in a ditch. Now right away I wanted to go to the car, but my boyfriend wouldn't let me. He was afraid of what I would see. So he calls 911, and as he calls 911, I hear, "Help me! Help me! Please, someone help me!" I had to go. When I get there, I see a big young man in the driver's seat, but I don't notice his face. What I see is his leg sticking out of the windshield. Now what I forgot to tell you when I got to the wreck, there was stuff all over the road, and I didn't know what it was. Quite frankly, I thought he had went to Walmart and got some vegetable soup. You know, the kind with the potatoes, the carrots, and that pearl barley. It wasn't soup. It was fat from his leg. All over the road. Big chunks, slices, slimy, and it stunk. But Anthony's doing fine. His mom called 2 weeks after the accident and said that he was home and recovering. But the details don't matter to me. What haunts me is the leg.
Haunted graveyard, disturbing the dead, ghost road, spooked hill, ghost road, damn crazy house, sing Bloody Mary 5 times. Oh, okay. Here's one about Packinghouse. One day there was a huge fire and hundreds of workers were trapped. They burned to their deaths. Today the legend says that the Packinghouse is haunted with their spirits. A place no one should really mess with. Who knows when the ghosts or spirits may become angry. But what's with all this rage? Lament of the Living by Chris and Bissett, 2005. The eyes were drained, the heart was bleeding. His ears were withered from all the screaming. Years of torture locked away with a key, hidden from vision. The truth was his plea. Reality was dawning and the cloak was erased, but this twisted glare of hatred was left on his face. His feelings were there and the world was waiting. But all of his truths were being negated. But all the rage he built up within had to soak through. Where to begin? His suffering poured and ripped flesh away. They had to have known all of his pain. The feelings of anger fleeing the core, destroying them all, until his heart bled no more.
Parents telling scary stories, horrible house, abandoned haunted slave cemetery, haunted mill, KKK, haunted college library, ghost road, disappearance of here we go, the Packinghouse. The factory caught fire while people were still inside, so it is said that the factory is haunted. What is it to haunt? The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, 1892. Very seldom do mere ordinary people like John and myself secure ancestral halls for the summer. A colonial mansion, a hereditary estate. I would say a haunted house and reach the heights of romantic felicity. But that would be asking too much in fate. But still, there is something queer about it. I can just feel it. Else, why be let so cheaply, and why have stood so long untenanted? The most beautiful place. It is quite alone, standing quite off the road, good 3 miles from the village. It makes me think of those English places that you read about. For it has hedges and walls and gates that lock. And lots of separate little houses, too, for gardeners and people. And it had lots of greenhouses, too, but they're all broken now. It ran into some legal trouble. Something about heirs and co-heirs. Anyhow, the place has been empty for years. It sort of spoils my ghostliness, I'm afraid. But still, I will proudly say there is something strange about it. I can just feel it. I even said so to John one moonlight evening. But he said what I felt was a draft, and he shut the window. I'm really getting quite fond of this big room. All but that horrid paper. But in the spots where it isn't faded, and when the sun is just so, I can see this strange, formless figure seemed to be just skulking about behind that silly, conspicuous front design. And then at night, in any kind of light, candlelight, lamplight, worst of all by moonlight, it just becomes just bars. The front pattern, I mean, and the woman behind is plain as can be. It took me a while to realize what that thing was, that dim sub-pattern. But now I'm quite sure it is a woman. There's something strange on this wall, low down by the mop boards. A straight, long, even smear. It goes around the whole room. Why, it goes behind every piece of furniture. Except the bed. A big, long, straight, even just smooth, round and round and round. Makes me wonder who did it, and what they did it for, and why they did it, and how they did it. It goes round and round and round and round and round, round and round and round. It makes me dizzy. I've really discovered something at last. Through watching so much at night, when it changes so. The front pattern, it does move, and no wonder. The woman behind shakes it. Sometimes I feel there are many a great woman behind that pattern, and sometimes only one. But she crawls fast, and her crawling shakes it all over. And in the bright spots, she stands very still. And in the dark spots, she grabs hold of the bars and she shakes them hard. And she is all the time trying to climb through that pattern. But no one can get through that pattern. It strangles so. They get through, and then the pattern strangles them and turns them upside down and makes their eyes white. If those heads were covered or taken off, it wouldn't be so bad. I think that woman gets out in the daylight. And you want to know why? I've seen her. Yeah. I can see her out every one of my windows. And it's the same woman I know, for she is always creeping. And most women don't creep by daylight. And I don't blame her a bit. It must be very humiliating to be caught creeping by daylight. I can see her. I have watched her. I can see her creeping. Way off in an open country. Creeping. As fast as a cloud shadow in a high wind.
Mine's romantic, George. The abandoned house and the scary black man. Massacre at the haunted moonshine factory. Oh, here's the one about the Packinghouse. The story goes that this place was a factory, like less than 20 years ago. I want to say like back 10 or so years ago. This was a paper factory, and it was a normal day at the factory. One of the workers wanted to smoke a cigarette and couldn't go outside to take a break. He dropped his smoke, and some of the paper caught on fire. The fire spread so quickly through all the paper and the wood that there were no survivors. I wonder what really went on there. The Jungle, Upton Sinclair, 1907. One by one, they hooked up the hogs. And one by one, with one swift stroke, they slit their throats. There was a line of pigs. 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 Squealing the lifeblood, ebbing away together, until at last they started again and vanished into a big vat of boiling water.
7 ghost churches on Hard Up Road, the backseat story. The haunted, immovable pillar. Haunted Road, bloody handprints, Hilton Head, South Carolina, Slave Island, Scary Grover Road, Bloody Mary in the window. Ah, here's another one about the Packinghouse. Supposedly, there was a fire or something in there, and there was a girl trapped on the next to top floor. And she jumped out of the window and died. And now every other night, or every other full moon, you can see her standing there in that window. But who is the woman in the window? A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner, 1930. When Miss Emily Grierson died, the whole town came to her funeral. The men out of some sort of respect for a fallen monument. The women, pretty much just to see the inside of her house, which no one save a combined gardener and cook had seen in over 10 years. Now and again, we can see her in one of the downstairs windows. Evidently, she had shut off the top part of the house, and she's just always there, like some sort of carved idol in a niche, looking, but not looking at us. Looking, but not looking at us. We can never tell which. And she's just there, generation after generation, dear, inescapable, tranquil, impervious, and perverse.
From what I hear on the Packinghouse, years ago it was a neat Packinghouse, and the owner went crazy and boarded up all the windows and doors while all his workers were inside, set it on fire, went to the top floor, and shot himself in the head. And if you go at certain times, even on a full moon, you're supposed to see a sound landing in the window, you're supposed to hear screams, you're supposed to hear a gunshot. I mean, there's just a bunch of different things that are supposed to happen at different times. So we got in 2 different cars and we drove up there. There was 4 or 5 of us total. And we went up to the Packinghouse, and at first, like, just the building itself, just the structure is so scary in itself. And we parked at the graveyard down the street. I've parked there every single time that I've gone there studying for the first time. I can't remember if the guys we went with the first time knew to park at the graveyard or what, but
was it down the street or around the
yeah, right after you pass the Packinghouse, you're just straight on the left, and you just turn left, and it's right there on the left.
Okay.
And there's a lot of lefts. Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's a little bit of a walk, but that's kind of, it's the fun part, because there's woods on both sides of you, and you're all like, you know, linked up, and, you know, and there's been times where I've gone with people, you know, like the times that, like, people insisted I would, like, stand in a circle and all pray together. Before we walk, I don't think those, but
All pray together in the graveyard
yeah.
before you go to the Packinghouse?
Yeah.
And then,
What'd you pray?
You know, I can't remember.
You know, okay.
I think just to keep us safe, we stood in front of the house and none of us were brave enough to go inside especially because of like supposedly homeless people living there. We just want to, get involved with that. And immediately when we got up to the house, we just felt like cold. And as we walked around the back of the house, there was just so many cold spots. And we just had like an overall feeling of just like sadness and just like total despair. And the thing that I noticed, kind of the full story of the mirror, all I know is that during the summer, I moved into my apartment this year, and 2 of the girls have lived there for a while, and 1 other girl moved in this year. But over the summer, a girl, Christine, was living there just for like the summer term or whatever, and apparently she was in Packinghouse one night, and she's a tiny girl. I have no idea how she got this huge mirror out of the Packinghouse, but she took this gorgeous mirror, and she left it in our apartment, and she's sitting against the wall in the kitchen. It's just a huge, like, what do you call it, dark wood?
Yeah, it's really pretty.
It's a gorgeous
It's
mirror.
creepy. Like,
I'm just waiting for something, like, things to go wrong in our apartment. But, like, I just feel, like, right now it's covered up by, like, mattresses and everything. It's our loft, so I've seen it. But, it's just, I don't know, it's weird. You just get in there and, like, look at it, you just are expecting, like, to see something. It's just kind of freaky how you get in our apartment. It's gorgeous.
What do you think about it, Rachel?
It's just crazy. Yeah, like I remember walking in there for the first time. I was like, yeah, that's from the Packinghouse. Like, what? She's like, yeah, Christine, pick it from the Packinghouse. Okay. Yeah, and you just look at it, and it's not even like that. It's packing. It's sort of like when you look at those pictures, like from like 100 years ago, and I don't know. I don't like looking at pictures from a while ago because people are clean now, but I don't know. But like, I don't know. There's just something eerie about it. And something, I don't know.
If you wonder why I was at a Packinghouse, like obviously it's not from way back then. There's a bunch of junk in there, junk cars in the back, but it's such a pretty. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, there may be like a few little cracks or something, but it's a gorgeous mirror. I don't know why anybody would just dump it off the Packinghouse. So it's just really weird, but it's just chilling in the Packinghouse.
Christine says that the date on the back is 1901.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's scary.
I don't want to touch it.
That's really scary. I haven't looked at the back. I probably should. Wow.
What initiated or what got you interested in the Packinghouse?
It was my freshman year, and oddly enough to what's going on right now, we were actually watching Candyman with my friend. Says, hey, you guys want to see this really cool place? It was at the scene where she's going through the tenement and got all the artwork and the broken walls. Where does it say? He's like, in Statesboro, I can take you to it. I like go, what's it called? So he takes me onto the internet, and he looks up, goes to Georgia and pulls up Statesboro, and there's just a little blurb about Packinghouse in Georgia. And it said something about going and hearing gunshots and seeing a woman in the window. And he said, well, he'd been there a couple times and never seen anything, but it was a really cool place, and it was falling apart, there was graffiti everywhere, it was just a really big piece of art, and we were doing a lot of photo art at the time, so we decided to just pack up, and there was 4 of us. It was myself, my friend Matt Gaines, my friend Matt Gray, who's no longer at the school, and my friend James Smith. And we went, and it had to be about 11:30, and we took
In the evening?
and we took Matt Gray's camera and Matt Gaines' camera, and that's the photos you have from their 2 cameras. And we went and we took some pictures from the outside, and then Matt says, well, let's go inside. And we went to the first store, the little first part, which is just kind of this guy's finished with a little garage. The walls are knocked out, everything, there's a car in there. And then we got some photos from down there, and then we moved up the stairs to the second story, which was really cool because right as you come up the stairs, there's a big chute with the word profanity written on it, which is, we submitted that one for a photo contest, didn't win, but we got it.
It says profanity, or what does it actually say?
It says profanity, it's the word profanity,
okay.
written in black spray paint on a meat chute.
Okay.
So that was really cool, and we moved through, and there's a big mirror up against the wall, it's like dusty, and right across from it's a room, and in the room just tons of junk and mattresses, people, we could obviously tell homeless people were had been staying there, because there's, bottles of liquor everywhere, and mattresses, and clothes, all kinds of just weird stuff lying on the floor. And then we continued moving around photographing the graffiti and all the really cool structural significance, like the big boiler hanging from the ceiling at one point, and then all the chutes and the holes and the signs everywhere. About every 10 feet, spray paint on the wall, the little block lettering is spitting is absolutely prohibited, which is really funny. It's a lot of fun to see that over and over and over everywhere. So it gives you an idea of what kind of life people work there will lead. We don't really spit too much today. Some people do, chew or whatever, but if they have to write that on the wall, you gotta imagine what people, like maybe people were chewing at work or they spit everywhere. It's the kind of things we think about when we look at all these little, pieces of history that are left there with people's names carved into the wall.
Where are people's names carved in the wall?
Mainly that's the upper floor. They're carved into walls and in the doors and stuff like that. On the lower floors, there's not much, mostly spray paint. But in the upper floors, especially right near the roof, there's a lot of names carved into the ladder area. You climb up and then there's a little stone awning before you get on the roof. And there's one that says, it says Carl Blackburn, July 19 something. I've got a picture of that. All over the place, there's just names carved in and dates from, I guess, people who live there, and maybe the students from the school, because there's dates from the 70s and 80s in there. And then it's just college students doing the same thing we were. But we moved to the Packinghouse. We moved and we found a room behind a big boarded up wall. Before there was a big pile of trash, and in there was somewhere that said like a little drinking area. There were couches and there was a blender in there, and all kinds of cool stuff.
Oh, wow. If there was a blender, there must be electricity.
At one point, the blender had not been used in a long time.
Oh.
But it was plugged in, so I imagine at one point there was electricity. We tried turning it on, it didn't go on, so it is either broken or there's not in there. There's no lights anywhere that seemed to be working. Couldn't find any switches or anything. But we kept moving through. We moved over to the next floor, and the next two floors had the cold rooms where I guess they hang you, because it's what it looked like. There were tracks on the ceiling that had been broken, big open areas that looked like there were, at one point, tons of people were working there, and that's where we started seeing all the fire damage, like the burnt ceiling and where pieces had been exposed of the wall. Clearly there'd been a minor fire in there. Nothing big like all the stories say where the place just like went ablaze, but enough to be significant to burn the ceiling up and burn some of the wall away.
Okay, where was that?
That would have been the third and fourth floor.
Okay.
And most of the fourth floor, the ceiling is just completely blackened and all cracked up and everything. And the pipes are showing everywhere. It's a really cool little place. And so we just continue walking through there. It's really falling apart up near the top of the wall. The floors are full of cracks and there's a lot of holes everywhere. There's two big elevator shafts that are really easy to fall down because they're wide open. The machinery, all the plumbing's exposed in there, like all the cranks and gears. So it was really easy to fall down in there. I imagine someone probably has at one point. Because the way the police, when they come by, they tell you not to fool around in there. For safety reasons.
The police have come by and told you not to?
Oh yeah, they caught us out there a bunch of times. We've been out there taking photos or filming, and they just walked up and asked us to leave. But so we just went through the place photographing it, got to the roof, took some photos from the roof, got back down and went around back, and a big auto graveyard kind of thing out there, and very cold out near the back. But I'd imagine, it's cold inside too, because they built the place to be a meat packing plant. It's got to be cool. But it's, freezing outside. It's a good, 70, 80 degrees ground. Normally, when you get back there, it feels like about 50 or 60. It's really chilly. So we hung out around back there for a while, getting pictures from the back, which most of them didn't turn out. They all came out black for some weird reason. Never figured out if it was just because of the camera screwing up to that point. But that's the point. The only weird picture we ever got from Packinghouse came from right there. And it's a picture of the Packinghouse with this weird little fog bank rolling into the picture. It's a close-up shot, and it just looks like something's forming in front of it. And it was taken at about chest level with a little digital camera. So we know it wasn't anybody breathing, and no one was smoking. We don't know what the smoke is. And everything. It's the only weird picture in 3 years I've ever gotten out of the Packinghouse.
That building, I suppose, would be one of the tallest buildings in the town when you think about it. That was really something. It's built like a fort, it looks like, as you see it. And they meant to build something right. But I would think that it was after the beginning of World War II when they stripped all the metal out of there, scrap. And when they were doing the scrap metal. And because when I went in it in the 40s, as a kid of about 11 or 12, it may have been 12, I met a bunch of my buddies and we rode our bikes there. I'm sure our parents would have just sprung us up. And we would have really gotten some scolding and sort of spankings had they known that we were planning this. But we planned that at school to meet out there and explore the old packing plant. And so there was no metal anywhere that I recall. There were open elevator shafts. There was no metal. You could see, it seemed like where maybe a torch or some sort of hacksaw had cut the railings and maybe banished us away from the stair steps. Yes, for salvage, for metal salvage. And but it was just an open building. Seemed like there was no covers on the windows. It was totally open. And we played up and down, and we played commandos. Of course, we were children of World War II, so we played a lot of commandos. And so, and we, if any of us had fallen in those pits, and it could be dark in some of those places, and I can just remember seeing the expanse of big floor space in there. Now, all these ghost stories is a bunch of hooey about somebody being killed and this, that, and the other. It was a spooky place because of the way it was and the way it looked. It was always, until just recent years, Packinghouse Road had been mainly a rural road, an old dirt rural road, and there's that big, almost forward-looking affair set out there off from the road, and it was spooky looking. It looked like an old fort, and that was enough to give you imagination and a good work over. So that was enough reason to get some good ghost stories started, because I think we probably one of the guys that loved to tell ghost stories, and it was creepy enough. I think we sat up there maybe on the roof and he told some ghost stories, just made stuff up, and I'm sure that's how it got things going about it being haunted. You know, I've never heard anybody say anything about anybody that worked there. You would have had a good, I would think that you would have had a good mixture of white and blacks. I doubt if women would have been in. I think it may have been men. I doubt it could have been in.
Tilly Olson lived in Omaha's Stockyards district in the 1930s. In her novel, Yo Nundio of the 1930s, she vividly portrayed work in meatpacking's predominantly female, offal, and casings rooms.
Year-round, breathing with open mouth, learning to pant shallow to endure the excrement reek of offal. The smothering stench of the blood house below. Windowless, bleared, dank, dark, heat of hell year-round. Feet always doubling in water, inside boots, outside boots. And over and over. For one constant motion.
Olson described these departments as places where men will not work. Her powerful and accurate description forcefully poses the question,
What made these unpleasant jobs women's work?
greatly complicating an explanation are the seemingly unrelated array of tasks performed by female Packinghouse workers through much of the 20th century.
Their jobs range from the brutal toil in the awful casings to the skilled knife jobs in the frigid ice hell of the pork trim.
To the simple repetitive operations in the immaculate sliced bacon department.
How did such different settings all become places dominated by women workers?
The contours of women's work emerged at the beginning of the 20th century. Expanding demand for meat and processed meat products led to innovations in production methods and technology that in turn created an entirely new range of jobs.
In addition to their sex, women's opportunities were profoundly influenced by race and ethnicity.
Male workers influenced this process by clinging to jobs they traditionally had held. Although the defeat of labor unions in the early 20th century greatly weakened their capacity to interfere with management's hiring decisions. The social relations of gender, race, and ethnicity among workers became embodied in the actual structure of the buildings, departments, and production processes that comprised the meatpacking factory. By the early 20th century, women in meatpacking's master machine played a subordinate role in the production process and filled ancillary jobs to the flow of meat and wealth through the plant.
Men generally operated any machinery.
Gender was simply part of the physical landscape. Contemporary explanations for the sexual division of labor,
To the extent offered at all,
Generally asserted that women were innately clean workers who were more dexterous than
And not as strong as
men. This rhetoric did not reflect the actual range of women's work. The contours of women's work in meatpacking took shape in a predominantly Midwestern industry, dominated by a handful of companies. The big four firms of Armour, Cudahy, Swift, and Wilson controlled the heartland of meat production, a swath reaching from St. Paul in the north to Fort Worth in the south, stretching as far west as Denver and as far east as Chicago. Rail spurs extending into the countryside transported live animals from farms to central stockyards and large urban hubs. Direct rail connections to the east sped the meat to consumers in major cities. In 19 these firms produced 81% of our nation's beef. They also controlled 81% of the hog slaughter.
meat production grew significantly in the early 20th century, although the rate of increase for such processed products such as sausage outpaced traditional fresh cuts.
between 1904 and 1925, production of fresh meat grew by 66% to 9.5 billion pounds.
In the same period, sausage production by Packinghouses almost tripled to 900 million pounds.
The expansion of the Big Four's Midwest plants rested on their ability to significantly increase productivity of labor. Men dominated the killing, dismembering, and butchering of livestock and controlled the flow of fresh meat through the plant. As no work can begin in a packing house until the animal is slaughtered, thus providing raw materials for subsequent factory operations. Male workers exercised far more power than women. Employment options dramatically expanded for women in the 1890s and early 1900s as firms used new technology to broaden their portfolios of processed meat products. Moreover, these opportunities for women occurred at the same time as millions of immigrants arrived. While immigrant men were able to move into jobs that had traditionally been male, ethnic, and in some cases black women were restricted to departments where the character of work fundamentally changed, or in newly created operations where they were the first employees.
Even though management could and did pay women less than men, female substitution only occurred in areas that were undergoing substantial changes in production methods,
such as sausage.
Management either resisted
or perhaps never considered
introducing women into what had been male departments devoted to the production of fresh meat.
Women's work not only offered far less pay than men's work, but also far less social status. Unlike male butchers, female packing house workers were kind of ashamed working in the yards, recalled Estelle Zabritsky. The physical toll of the jobs, such as cracked and broken fingernails and rough hands from the hard toll, made it impossible to hide the embarrassing truth from other women. For a prospective date.
While male jobs provided upward mobility and community respect.
Women, especially the young, felt humiliated for having no other option than to work in a packing house.
East European ethnic women dominated the women's jobs that entailed the most training and skill. Close proximity of the neighborhoods to the packing house district and the children of the women were more reliable and flexible source of labor. For example, when Foreman Tommy Magnet at the Chicago Armor Plant needed more workers, he would recruit relatives and neighbors from the ethnic back of the yards community, adjacent to the stockyards.
While company publicists might impugn East European ethnics as lesser races, in fact, ethnic women with family responsibilities dominated skilled female jobs because they provided the most return to the foremen for the months spent in training.
Black women predominated under the least desirable of women's jobs, performed under poor working conditions, and for low pay. Like female ethnics, black women were reliable long-term employees because their families needed the income. However, they had far fewer job opportunities than white women.
While female ethnics could find work in a variety of factory settings, meatpacking was one of the few industrial jobs open to black women before World War II.
Even lowly paid positions in a packing house offered 3 to 4 times the remuneration of domestic service, the area of employment in which most black women worked.
Management routinely took advantage of black women's poor labor market position to assign them to the worst women's jobs. Moreover, employers in meatpacking typically harbored a racist assumption that black men and women could handle jobs where, as one company publicist wrote in 1913,
the heat was intense and the smell
uncongenial for workers of a more sensitive disposition. The workers with the highest turnover rate, young, native-born women, presided in cleaner departments that required little training. Native-born women worked jobs that actually paid as poorly as those for black women. But native-born women worked in the best conditions in meatpacking. Unlike ethnic and black women, native-born women had a short-term perspective on wage work, correctly anticipating not to return to the packing house after marriage. They could also find several other job options and could obtain clerical work at higher pay than in meatpacking. As meatpacking was only a temporary job for young, native-born women,
ethnic and black women were actually more reliable and valuable employees.
Hence, the Central Employment Office of Meatpacking generally hired these women to perform simple operations, such as packing sliced bacon, and place them in cleaner departments that served as show places for visitors to aid their perspective of meatpacking as a modern business, suitable for the employment of young American girls.
That there was ever a fire, or of anybody being killed at the Statesboro Packinghouse, or of any women that worked there. But there still is this one question: who is the woman in the window?
Triangle Factory Fire. New York Times, March 26.
The glass blackens and shatters.
1911.
Who will come for us?
141.
The glass blackens and shatters. Who will come for us?
Trapped high up in Washington.
The glass
Place
blackens
building.
and shatters.
The glass blackens and shatters.
Who will come for us?
Who will come for us?
Inside. 3 stories of a 10-floor building at the corner of Green Street and Washington Place were burned yesterday.
The glass
And
blackens
while
and
the fire
shatters.
was going on,
Who will come for us?
147 young men and women, at least 125 of them mere girls, were burned to death or killed by jumping to the pavement.
The
below.
glass blackens and
The
shatters.
fire was practically
Who will
contained.
come for us?
It was confined to 3 floors.
The glass blackens and shatters.
and
Who will come for us?
The victims were employed at making shirtwaists
Glass blackens
by
and
the
shatters.
Triangle Waste.
Who will come for us?
Most of them
Glass blackens and shatters. Who will
many of
come
them
for
came
us?
from Brooklyn. Almost all were the main support.
The glass blackens and shatters. Who will come for us?
The Triangle Factory Fire. Chicago.
The glass
Sunday,
blackens and shatters.
28.
Who will come for us?
Page 2. Thrilling
The glass blackens and shatters. Who
Holocaust.
will come for us?
The glass blackens and shatters. Who will come for
In the
us?
office buildings across Washington
Glass
Place,
blackens and
scores
shatters.
of men
Who will come
paid
for us?
beyond office hours worked at their desks.
The glass blackens and shatters. Who will come for us?
Behind her dashed
The glass blackens and
glass
shatters.
blackens and shatters. Who will come for us?
Come for us.
Who will come for us?
squad policemen dashed up 8 flights of stairs and
The glass
fired
blackens and shatters. Who will come
The
for
glass
us?
blackens and shatters. Who will
The
come
glass
for us?
blackens and shatters. Who will come
The
for
glass
us?
blackens and shatters. Who will come for us? The glass blackens and shatters. Who will come for us? The glass blackens and shatters. Who will come for us? The glass blackens and shatters. Who will come for us?
The
The glass blackens and shatters. Who will come for us? The glass blackens and shatters. Who will come for us? The glass blackens and shatters. Who will come for us? The glass blackens and shatters. Who will come for us?
women and young
The glass blackens and shatters.
fire
Who will come for us?
fire extinguishing systems. History has repeated itself Here, too, there were problems with fire exits and extinguishing systems. Labor.net, injury, death, and the American worker. OSHA has just 2,000 inspectors covering the country's 6 million work sites. And even when they have cited employers for violations, the fines generally have been small and often have gone uncollected. The terrible consequences of the government neglect were made most horrendously clear when fire swept through a chicken processing plant in Hamlet, North Carolina in 1991. There were no windows in the one-story building, no sprinkler or fire alarm system, and the doors were chained shut. They were screaming, "Let me out!" They were beating on the door, according to a news account. Blackened footprints could be seen later on a door where workers tried to kick their way out. A padlock was found on a door marked, "Fire door. Do not lock." 25 men and women died, 55 were injured. Not once in its entire 11 years of operation had the plant been inspected. Most of the injured and dead were black women, poor white women, and immigrant women. Who is the woman in the window?
Up on 10th, typists and bookkeepers leave ledgers to ashes, machines to melt.
The Packers and switchboard lady gone.
Phone cords and crate slats split, spurt into stars and meteors.
Up on 10th, our finished shirtwaists unfold, crack the crates, jump upright, join sleeves.
Dance the whore and mazurka, spin like dreidels.
They call to us our makers.
Stitcher,
Presser, cutter,
Tucker.
I saw them piled, testified Fireman Wall. They pressed their faces to a little window.
Always adding, revising this manuscript. I plant direct quotations on the page, arrange line breaks, versification, newspaper files. Francis Perkins speaks from the streets. I felt I must sear it not only in my mind, but on my heart forever. One mother.
When will it be safe to earn our bread?
Their words. And yet some call it schmaltz, soap opera sentiment, Victorian melodrama. Riding in the subway. Smoke fizzes in my ears and in my room, electric heater coils glow, C's and O's in the box. To write about them, and yet not interfere. Although I'm told it's a poet's task to create a little world. A testimony. Two tried to stay together on the ledge, but suddenly one twisted and lunged in a burning bundle. And the other, arms straight out, as if speaking and shouting to an invisible audience. She gestured in embrace and jumped. Her name was Celia Weintraub. She lived on Henry Street.